今回ですね、2回目、1回目が12月に開催されて、12月、私がなんかキーノートみたいな話をさせてもらったんですけど、今日一応司会進行をします、寺島優也です。ミドルマンガイドのメンテナンスをしています。皆さんミドルマンのガイドを読まれていると思うんですが、そちらのメンテナンスと、日本語の修正とか英語文が追加されたときに対応っていうのをさせてもらっています。今日ハッシュタグは TMN です。よろしくお願いします。東京ミドルマンミートアップは P4D のイベントの一つです。P4D、コミュニティ、コミュニティ of programmers and designers. P4D is good community. Programmers and designers teach each other to each other. Meetups, as known as Mokmokai, is held twice a month. 英語笑わないけど下手くそなの分かってるからね。今日のゲストはとても幸運なことにミドルマンの開発者のトーマス・レイノルズさんが来てくれています。あと同僚のですね、ステファニーさんも一緒に今日、日本の方に来ているということで来ていただきました。よろしくお願いします。今日日本人の To Japanese people、君たちにお願いがあります。もう分かってると思うんですけど、英語あんまり喋れないで、今日は頑張って喋るんですが、皆さんもちょっと今日はせっかくのミートアップなんで、ゲストの方とコミュニケーションを取ってほしいと思っています。私たちには強い味方があります。Please talk。今日スケジュール、今これなんですけど、オープニングトーク、次ゲストプレゼンテーションで休憩ですね、ブレイクタイム。あと日本のユーザーさんに、短いプレゼンテーション、いわゆる LT なんですけど、今日はあんまり時間の制限かけないんでゆっくり喋ってもらって大丈夫です。その後はですね、フリートークタイムで、some foods and some drinks、寿司とピザと、いろいろ飲み物が来ます。なので今日は有料です。最後にですね、フォトセッション、記念撮影ってやつですね。せっかくなんでみんなで写真を撮って終わりにしたいなと思っています。よろしくお願いします。ごめんね、空気が硬いよ。大丈夫かな。ミスターライド。Next, please.
Hello. Start simple. All right. This is a talk about Middleman. I'm going to go through a little bit about why I started the project and why I think it's been successful, and why I'm super excited that there are so many people here to talk about it and learn about it. So I'm Thomas Reynolds. TDREYNO on Twitter, and that's my email address. If I go too quickly, or if you have any other questions, please email me or tweet me later. Thank you very much for our fantastic Japanese translation of the documents. I think it's helped a lot. I'm very grateful. So, who are the middlemen? Me, personally, Thomas Reynolds. And then I have two other people who have helped me out with a lot of code over the years. Ben Hollis in Seattle and Carl Freeman. And also, there's been several hundred open source contributors who've submitted pull requests and bugs and documentation to the project, which made it what it is. So I want to talk about why Middleman and why open source and how I feel about the whole endeavor. So Middleman is open source software. It was born because I was able to take code that someone else had written in a language that someone else had written and build my own thing on top of it and take what they gave me and fit what they had to my needs. And I think the first rule of open source software is do not reinvent the wheel, because someone's already done what you're trying to do, and maybe they did it worse, but maybe they did it better, and maybe they've had years to figure out all the things that you're going to mess up if you try to do it on your own. that doesn't mean that like their thing is perfect. You can move on from there. So if you have a couple problems with something that you're already using and you love it, then go ahead, like submit pull requests, engage in the community, and make it better for everyone. But sometimes there's a point where whatever you're targeting just doesn't move quick enough, and then feel free to fork it and take it over and make it your own. So Middleman came from a project called Staticmatic, which was a same kind of thing, static Ruby generator from several years ago. It was pretty simple. I think it just did ERB and maybe not even SAS when it first came out. But I built tons of websites using Staticmatic and contributed a lot of stuff back to the community. Eventually, the original maintainers didn't have enough time for it, had family lives, moved on, and transferred it along with my changes over to me, and that became Middleman. So the important thing is to solve your own problems. If you're just building something for everyone, maybe it is useless for almost everyone except. But if you build things for yourself, then you'll always have at least one user, and hopefully you can find people with your same job and use case, and then you'll have a nice audience. And of course, share your solutions. That's what makes open source open source. If you keep it to yourself, if you keep it in your own repository, if you just always make changes at your work, but you never contribute back to the community, then things don't get better for everyone, and it puts a lot of weight on a few individuals to write a lot of code. So you can share your thing. I renamed Staticmatic, I shared it, I called it Middleman. The really important thing about open source for me is support. And that means that once you put it out into the world, you have to help this thing live. And so you can't just like throw something up and say, I wrote this really great code, aren't I special? Like maybe you should use it, maybe you shouldn't. If you're putting it out there, I think you have to support it and you have to help people use it. And if they find bugs in your thing, well, you got to fix it because you put this thing and you stood upon it and said that this is something important. And without that, there's no trust, and they'll just move on to some other project. And then you just repeat it. Just keep the same steps, do it over and over and over and over and over and over. Maybe you'll have something successful. So in the last 5 years, we've had 260 releases of Middleman. It's really hard to read. There are 16 official repositories and extensions that with a core team maintains. And there are 1,221 closed bugs on the main repository, and also 61 open. So getting successful means opening up your email every day and seeing that number go up, and then having to go to your work and not being able to make it go down. But thankfully, there's other people in the community who help me out. So I want to talk really quickly about version 4, which is what we're working on now. We got a couple goals for this. Basically, the code base has grown rather large because we've been merging in changes and features from other people without too much oversight. And so, yeah.
Please speak more slowly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Tell me to stop. Sure. I get nervous.
みんなで緊張しちゃってるから今日。
All right. So our goal for version 4, simplify. We're removing some supported features, which I don't think anyone was using, so that's no problem. First of all, there was a way you could run Middleman without an actual project configuration, kind of like a static Python server or like a one-liner that you would do to replace something like Apache. We're removing support for that. We're removing support for the ability to not name all the extensions of a file name. So things like SAS will always be CSS, but we're going to make you name it correctly. So you need to name it app.css.sas. The same goes for CoffeeScript or anything else like that. That'll let us be consistent and not have unexpected behavior. We're removing the old module extension support, which was how you wrote extensions for Middleman in version 2. And so that's been removed from core for a long time now, but we're actually dropping support entirely for version 4. The page command in config used to take a block, and you could evaluate code in there, and you could set instance variables and other computation. We're removing that in favor of a way of annotating pages with additional metadata. So you can run your scripts up front, and then if you have anything that would have needed to be evaluated, you can just pass that in directly as a hash. We're also removing the data.page option, which was this weird middle ground that supposedly just gave you the front matter for a page you were looking at. But since we're giving you more ways to add data to a page, we're going to remove that, and you'll be using the current page.data method. We're also standardizing the code base. So we already only support Ruby 9+. We're going to continue doing that, and we're changing the code to those new styles. We're using a tool called RubuCop, which lets us look at our entire code base, enforce style guidelines, and then run those style guidelines against pull requests. So the code that comes in is uniform. We also just want to put some focus on the project and decrease the number of different ways you can do the same thing. We're going to remove the middleman command from the core gem. We're going to move it into its own extension that'll be installed by default. That means you can depend on middleman without depending on command line tools. So you could use middleman directly from Ruby. We're pulling Compass out into its own extension. It's still official, but we'd like to explore other ways of, such as Bourbon or auto prefixer for doing the kind of things that Compass did. We had a feature for ASCII doc, which is a similar format to Markdown in core. We're pulling it out into its own extension. And we're trying to remove some of the hooks from the config file itself that people were using to chain a whole bunch of pre-processing and post-processing. So we like to suggest that from now on you make a rig file, and then middleman is just a step in that rig file, and you can either shell to the middleman command or use the middleman or the Ruby API for building the site. The rig is a much better tool for that kind of stuff. There's a couple new features that we're going to work on. First up, we're refactoring how internationalization works. This is in really early stages. We're still taking suggestions and use cases and test cases for how we can make this better. If you're using localization currently, that's going to stay. We're not going to remove that. There'll just be a new extension that has a different kind of flow. So in this refactor, we're going to remove the localizable folder, which is where all the localized content had to live. And now the whole project can be localized. And then we're going to say, when we set up localization, we're going to say specifically which files we want to add to it with an array of globs. And you can also filter some of those pages to add which locales they support. So by default, it'll be like it is now, where if you have a localized a language file in your locales directory, it'll localize everything that matches the glob. But you can do subsets if you only have a specific locale for certain paths. You can also, per file in the front matter, you can say which languages or locales this file supports. And it'll be built into those folders when you build the project. And finally, the link to and image tag and all the asset helpers will be aware of localization. So when you link to an image and you're in the Japanese locale, then it will look for a localized image first before falling back to a shared common image. We're going to add the Rails concept of environments. So instead of just having development and build as the two built-in ways you can describe things, you can have as many as you want. You can have a folder called config. You can put a file in there, like the Rails environments folder, and then you can call a command. You pass in the environment to the server or build command, and you can target those environments. So this way you can have a staging environment, you can have production, you can have server A or server B and have them be slightly different. we're trying to pull out a lot of code from Middleman blog that helps people organize and group content. So we're calling these collections, and this is going to give you a way to run a glob against files in your, or paths in your site, and say these are grouped in some way. So the first is basically how the blog system works now. You can have this URL, it'll find the files on your system and pull out the metadata from the keys, the year, month, day keys there. And then when you get in one of those pages, it knows its own year because that was pulled out from the path. But we're going to expand that, and the second option is a little more complex. So you could have a folder on your disk with all the users, and a subfolder for each of the letters of a user's first name. And then we could build a collection of users that's grouped off of the letter. And then we're going to also, you set up the template you want as an index for those pages. So you can say, you know, this is going to be a list. That will be a list of, or I guess there will be a user slash A, a user slash B, a user slash C, which will be the index of all the users who had HTML files in that folder. And then once you have a collection, this group of some pages, you can add pagination for free. At the bottom is a kind of example template. If you requested the URL users A pages 2, you would be able to look at the users from that folder, started with the letter A, and then we're on page 2, and it's page 5 per page. We're also going to allow you to start installing templates directly from GitHub. So right now you have to make a Ruby gem and an extension and install it, and it's kind of awkward. So you'll be able to just basically say, I'm starting a new project, and the template is some repository that lives on GitHub, and it'll pull it down and run it and install it for you. All right, so that's everything that we're working on version 4. It's a lot of cleanup, not a lot of huge features. If you have comments, everything's still in flux. We don't expect to be done until maybe October or November, later in the year. So there are a lot of ways that you can help out with the community. We have the forum that runs. I don't know, right now it's kind of just one giant feed of every single person commenting on Middleman. I don't know if it makes sense to have a Japanese sub-forum, but it'd be great to have more Japanese users in the forum. Of course, if you're making new code and you're willing to support it and you want to put it out in the world, we have the directory, which you can make a pull request and add your gem to the list of supported extensions. And then finally, we're always accepting pull requests, and we love new features or bug fixes to my existing code. And then I just want to be able to help you guys. I want you guys, your work to be better. I want it to be easier. I don't want people to be cursing my name far away. So if you have any problems, you can contact me any of these ways. You can get me on GitHub for bugs. You can just send me a tweet. And happy to respond, or send me an email, and we can talk through anything you have. Thank you.
喋ってることは分かったかなじゃあ、I explain about version 4。多分、バージョン4のことを言われても分からない人がいると思うんですけど、一応説明します。実は今日このスライド事前に私もらってました。config.rb、今ある単体のですね、ルートの中にあるものを除去されます。この後で出てきますけど、ディレクトリ化で環境ごとに用意できるようになると。あとですね、これ、アップサス。このアップサスっていうのは、ミドルマンの扱いの中では、ファイル名が正しくありません。本当はアップ CSS サスじゃないといけない。そうしないと変換の対象になりませんが、今、実はこれも変換しているんですね、勝手に。でそれがドキュメントの方内の動作になります。でちょっとこれが個人的には辛いんですけど、今のエクステンションがデュプリケートになって新しいモジュール 文字のタイプになっていきます。あとね、そうだな、この辺とかすごい細かいんですけど、ドキュメントの中にはカレントページっていう変数が出てきて、それでページ内のデータが参照できるって書いてあるんですけど、実はこれでも今読めるようになっています。中身を読むとかなり混乱するんですけど大変です。あとはですね、コードの最適化のテストの対応っていうのがこれから始まると、実際にはもうちょっと前のバージョンから始まってるんですけど、でこれからの流れとしては、ジェムの分離ですね、 CLI のジェムに分離されて、あとはもうコンパスもデフォルトで今サポートしているのも分離、ASCII ドックも分離していくと、よりモジュール化されていくということです。あとはですね、これはちゃんとコードを読んでないんですけど、タスクの処理とかが全部外にと分離されていきます。I18N って皆さんほとんど使われてないと思うんですけど、これ最新版のスライドなんですね。1時間ぐらい前に私これ知らなくてやばいこれ日本語化するときもちょっと影響があります。これからロケールの扱いとか日本語化の、ローカライズの処理が変わってくると、前より扱いやすくなっていると思います。結構今のはディレクトリのルールの中で処理をかけているんで、いろいろ面倒が多い、そのあたりが改善されていくんだと思います。あとですね、環境、これよく話に出るんですけど、エンバイロメントモードですね、コンフィグレ、デベロップメント、プロダクション、あとは例えばテストなんかをつけていいんですけど、ビルドしたりとかサーバー上げたりっていうのが処理できるようになります。ということは、例えばそれぞれちゃんと環境によってデプロイ先を変えるっていうこともできるようになるわけですね。コレクションズ、これちょっと長くなるんでやりましょうミドルマンブログの中に機能があるんですけど、ディレクトリ階層の中を読んで、ページをいろいろいじれるっていうのが結構まだ載ったのが最近なんですが、これがミドルマン本体の方に使えるようになる。あとこれがすごい、これ分かります？今のミドルマンっていうのはテンプレートのジェムをいちいち入れないと使えないんですけど、リモートで動くようになります。 GitHub に置いてあればみんなテンプレートを使えるようになります。おー、ビアはい、あとはですね、彼からのお願いで、手伝ってくださいと、フォーラムで連絡議論したりとか、エクステンションを作ってください、どんどん手伝ってください。あと困った時はですね、リポジトリと、あとツイッターのアカウントが、今日はミドルマンアップっていう名前で紹介してるんですけど、彼は個人のアカウントもあります。でそちらに連絡するとすぐ連絡がつきます。で今日何通もメールしてたんですけど、こちらのメールはですね、すごいスピードで返ってくるので、ぜひ悩んだことがあったら連絡してあげてください。でこんな感じです、バージョン4。何か質問がある方、はい。
ローカライズのところをもうちょっと詳しく知りたいなと思って。
ローカライズ？
ロケールごめんなさい。ロケール I18。はい。これっていうのはJSON で各言語のあれが書かれている。
He asked about localized feature. This JSON. What is this JSON class?
So you have all your localized files in YAML, and so you might want to be able to request those from a client-side app. So if you're doing client-side localization, then you could dump all the YAML into a JSON file and read it from the client side. So that just tells it that you would want like en.json or jp.json, like separate files to request to the client.
ご想像の通り、この JSON のファイルが言語ごとのファイルになると。どうしよう、日本語化が大変ですね。
今のって多分サーバーサイドでの変換じゃなくて、それを、JS にダンプして出すことによって、クライアントサイドでも言語対応というか、
サポートありがとうございます。
感じだと思います。
ということだそうです。最後どう仕上がるかちょっと気になります。他に何か
Do you have plan to support RSpec, Shai? RSpec.
RSpec? We do write some of our tests in RSpec.
In official repository?
What's that?
Official repository? in do you write aspect tests in official repositories?
Very, very small.
Very small.
Yeah.
そうですね、R スペックのテストはちゃんとサポートしてるのかって話ですけど、実は普段のテストは休館バーでほとんど書かれてるんですけど、若干だけあります。
僕もそれやってて結構自分で書かないといけないことが多かったので、まあなんかオフィシャルでちゃんとライブラリ化してくれると嬉しいなっていうのを思ってます。はい。
参考例も一切ないっていう。
ちょっと書きます。
僕は何か聞きたいことある方いるかな。OK？ じゃあ後でまだ時間今日かなり余る見込みなのでゆっくり個別に話してみてください。頑張ってみんな英語喋りましょう。かなり来てるけどね、俺今日もね。はい。今日松田さん、食い物って届いたの？もうちょっと待って、時間とかって。
8時ぐらいに来るよ。
あ、それぐらいか。8時か。乾杯しちゃうか。乾杯しちゃおう。みんな緊張してるから。はい、どうぞ。
質問いいですか？はい。I have two questions. I want to know which Ruby web development framework do you prefer? And the second question is, do you have intent to help non-programmer, for example, web designers, use this Middleman app?
I do almost entirely front end these days, so I use a little Rails, I use a little Sinatra, but nothing big. Most of my stuff is in Sinatra because it's small. As far as supporting designers, I'm not one, so it's hard for me to know where the problems are, but if there are usability issues, then we would love to help fix those and support them.
In Japan, there's a movement among some web designers to use Middleman to just develop strategy website, not including logs. So, and myself, I'm feeling that this Middleman is very good to help non-programmer web designers. So
great. Yeah, we want to make it better for everyone. So
I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you. 一つだけお知らせです。僕4月から禁酒してますから気にしないでください。皆さんお酒は行き渡りましたでしょうか。大丈夫。よし、そう。どうしようかな。乾杯した人いるか。今日は、ゲストに来てくれたってことと、まあ今日はせっかくミートアップでみんなすごいナーバスで、まあ多分俺が一番ナーバスなんですけど、そのナーバス。まあアルコールを入れて元気にいきましょう。じゃあ乾杯。乾杯。寿司やった。もうすぐピザも来るらしいんで、ちょっと15分20分ぐらい休みましょう。
すごい休み時間。
いや余っちゃう。Like that. Sushi is ready. お寿司開けちゃっていいよ。ピザが来るぐらいまで。これだけ。 はい、next。ショートプレゼンテーション。
ごめんなさい。
8時ぐらいからショートプレゼンテーションを始めたいと思います。
電源あと1個ポート空いてます。
こっちにも。
あっちも。あっち。
おお。
これもする、これここで置いといてもらって、俺のとは超持ってした方がいい。お。よいしょ。そこ使ってもらって。よいしょ。
この休憩時間で発表の方、接続のテストをしてもらっていいですか。
Yeah.
出るかに大丈夫
みんなそっちにもう
動き出したら